Claudia Gomez was a 20-year-old migrant from a poor village in Guatemala who fled to the U.S. in May of 2018 with dreams of getting a better education. During the trip, she and a group of other migrants encountered Border Patrol agent Romaldo Barrera in an empty lot in Rio Bravo, Texas. During that encounter, Gomez was shot and killed. Agent Barrera claims that when he approached the migrants in this empty lot, that a number of them rushed him, and as he was trying to hold on to the gun actually went off and struck Claudia Gomez. Texas Rangers and FBI agents also interviewed the migrants at the scene, and they actually told a very different story. They said nobody rushed Agent Barrera, that some of them scattered. We basically learned that immediately after the shot was fired, several Border Patrol agents and officials showed up to the scene, as well as an attorney for the Border Patrol union. One of the officers took Barrera's weapon and exchanged it with another handgun. Ultimately, Barrera was driven away from the scene. Barrera wouldn't speak to investigators until 3 days later.
Hello, this is Hector Vladimir. Today is the 22nd of November, 2024. I want to take this opportunity today and give you an update on the case of Claudia Patricia Gonzales. If you're not familiar with the case, it is a case of a migrant worker that was unfortunately and tragically killed near the border town of Rio Bravo. And I happen to be here today reporting on this event, and I would like to bring a few updates to those interested about, again, the case of Claudia Patricia Gonzales and her death, her killing, back in May 23rd of 2018. If you're not familiar with the case, she was a Guatemalan 20-year-old woman that was migrating into the United States via the Rio Grande in the border between Texas and the United States, again near the small town of Rio Bravo in Texas. And she, along with I believe there were other 5 young men who were accompanying her, made it through the border and into the town of Rio Bravo here in Texas. And they were tracked and followed by authorities, the Border Patrol, perhaps other authorities, and confronted. And eventually she was shot, fatally shot. And there was a huge controversy. There is a huge controversy on this because she was wrongly killed, or killed without much explanation, reasoning, justification. And the reason for this, or reasons, are still unknown. Of course, unsurprisingly, the case was swept under the rug eventually, and she has not gotten justice to this day. Today, again, is the 11th month of 2024, November 22nd, 2024, and still no justice has been delivered. I would like to, again, take this moment here in this location. I'm doing some nearby work, and I happen to be here in this location. Thankfully, I have this opportunity to bring you an update on the case. So I was looking through the internet just to see if there's any updates, and there seems to be one from the USA Today. And the update is an article from the USA Today called 3 Days of Silence, Records Reveal Inside Story of Border Patrol Shooting. Again, the article's from the USA Today newspaper, and it's called 3 Days of Silence, Records Reveal Inside Story of Border Patrol Shooting. And the story is from Rio Bravo, Texas. Again, I am right now on location. Quite unique because, as you will read here in the story, it is connected to key points here. I also did visit the nearby place that the killing took place on Centeno Lane. It is towards the river, Rio Grande, and I would say it's about maybe less than half a mile from the actual river on Centeno Lane. It is as you go towards the river on your left side, and the houses look pretty much the same as they did, not much different as in that fateful and regretful day, May of 2018. So the article goes, Rio Bravo, Texas. When Claudia Patricia Gonzales, 5 other migrants floated across the Rio Grande on a bright spring morning. Border Patrol agents detected them almost immediately. One agent started tracking their footprints to Rio Bravo, a tiny suburb 14 miles downstream from Laredo. Two others, mounted on ATVs, rode through the adjacent blocks. A few minutes later, Gomez was lying in the tall grass of an empty lot on Centeno Lane, blood streaming from a bullet wound on the back of her head. As she took her last breaths, the abandoned lot started to fill up. Troopers from the State Department of Public Safety would arrive, some with guns drawn. A county sheriff's deputy wearing a body camera would take in the whole scene in minute detail, right down to the black gloves one Border Patrol agent was wearing. There would be a Texas Ranger, FBI agents, even a woman from the neighborhood who emerged from her house to stream video the scene to her Facebook page. Soon, a team of paramedics would arrive to try to save Gomez's life. By then, one person wasn't there, Ronaldo Barrera, the U.S. Border Patrol agent who had fired the shot that penetrated Gomez's skull. Investigators would not speak to Barrera at the scene or nearby. They would not interview him for another 3 days. News of the shooting of Claudia Gomez came and went quickly in spring of 2018 amid the sea of headlines about the then President Donald Trump's controversial border policies. Since then, a surge of crossings has only increased the larger debates over the border security. But inside the nation's intractable immigration battle, advocates and researchers sits one remarkable consistency. When Border Patrol agents shoot and kill immigrants, they are almost never punished. In the Border Patrol's 100-year history, no agent has ever been convicted of a wrongful killing while on duty. Since 2010, according to the advocacy group Southern Border Communities Coalition, which tracks all such cases, there have been 304 fatal encounters with agents from the Border Patrol and its parent entity, Customs and Border Protection. Those deaths include 68 use of force killings, such as fatal shootings, asphyxiations, and taser shots, as well as 108 deaths caused by vehicle collisions, the majority of which occurred during high-speed chases initiated by the Border Patrol, according to the group's statistics. For years, critics claimed investigative teams deployed to shooting scenes actually worked to conceal evidence and protect agents. The agency announced in 2022 that it had disbanded the so-called critical incident teams, but a recent federal investigation found the agency still struggles to investigate its own shootings properly. In the 2018 shooting of Claudia Gomez, there was no rush to transparency. Barrera was never charged, so there's no criminal filing. Gomez's family settled a lawsuit against the federal government for an undisclosed amount, and on the condition that the family agreed not to discuss the case, so there's no civil court record. The FBI would tell investigators they found no civil rights violations. A CPB official said the shooting remains under investigation now, 6 years later, so there are no internal findings to review. But the Border Patrol wasn't the only agency to arrive in the empty lot that morning. Documents obtained by USA Today, including the investigative reports by the Texas Department of Public Safety and Webb County Sheriff's Office, offer a rare glimpse into what happens after an agent pulls the trigger. As authorities gathered, paramedics tested Gomez with electrocardiogram, then stretched a silver thermal blanket over her body. By then, the Rangers' report shows Barrera was already on the move. First, he sat on a stump a few blocks away, where he handed over the gun from the shooting, trading it to a colleague who stashed it under a seat of a patrol vehicle. Border Patrol officials later explained to investigators what happened next. One drove Barrera to the Exxon station at the edge of Rio Bravo as they waited in the gas station parking lot at the foot of the highway. A white BMW rolled in off the road. Inside were an attorney for the Border Patrol Agents Union and two other passengers, the other two agents who had been on patrol during the shooting. The group conferred in the parking lot, then with Barrera in one vehicle and his two fellow agents in the other. They pulled onto a highway and headed out of town. Barrera's interview. 3 days later, the investigators' notes show Barrera walked into the FBI office in Laredo, flanked by the attorney from the car, George Altgeld, and another attorney, Oscar Osmar Peña. Sitting at the table across from an FBI investigator and the Texas Ranger, Barrera retold the events of the shooting as he remembered it. It was a sensor that first detected the group's footfalls
that morning in late May 2018 as 6 migrants crossed through the town. Barrera and the other agents on duty had already been on alert that day after one of them reported seeing a man with a tattoo on his neck. The border agents thought the man was a scout for a smuggling operation. It wouldn't be the first time they had caught smugglers in Rio Bravo. The city's narrow straight streets climbed from the riverbank toward the U.S. highway at the edge of town, and from there, the rest of the country. Barrera knew how to track footprints through the brush. He set his sights on a possible hiding spot on Centeno Lane and gunned the motor of his Border Patrol ATV. As Barrera approached the empty lot, someone else approached him first. It was the man with a tattoo on his neck. The sight left Barrera on high alert. Barrera followed the footprints into the brush of the empty lot and saw the migrants for the first time. There were 6 of them, huddled in the corner of the lot. One of the migrants was holding a stick the size of a broom handle. He remembered. In that moment, Barrera was alone and outnumbered.
Agáchese, get down,
He yelled in Spanish and English. He pulled his .40 caliber service pistol from his holster and held it ready. Instead of complying, the group of migrants rushed toward him, he told investigators. He reenacted the scene as investigators watched. 2 of the migrants shoved his right arm straight out to the side, the gun now pointing wide. He tried to fend off the others with his left arm. As he struggled, Barrera said he could feel another person slip beneath his right arm. He could feel a pair of hands sliding closer to the gun that was still in his grasp. He feared he was losing the weapon. He squeezed harder. The gun fired.
I tried to hold on to my gun. I squeezed it, and the round went off,
Barrera told investigators. As Barrera relived the scene, the investigators noticed he grew visibly shaken. At the empty lot, he fell to the right, he said, dropped to his knees, and braced himself with his gun hand on the ground. Peña, the attorney, interrupted to note that
Barrera did not have independent memory of pulling the trigger.
But Barrera did describe the next thing he remembered, seeing a woman, unresponsive, lying on the ground with a hoodie covering her head. The life and death of Claudia Gomez. Claudia Gomez grew up in the outskirts of Quetzaltenango in Guatemala, in a small poverty-choked village. Most of the people are indigenous. She graduated high school with high marks and dreamed of becoming an accountant. But with no money for college, unable to find a job, hope faded. In May 2018, when she was 20, Gomez left for the United States. She trekked across Mexico and arrived at a safe house in Nuevo Laredo at around 7 p.m. on May 22nd. Other migrants were there already, including at least one from her hometown in Guatemala. The next morning, on May 23rd, Gomez and other migrants floated across Rio Grande on inner tubes. According to the Texas Department of Public Safety report's account of their interviews, the asylum seekers followed directions through the blocks of Rio Bravo to a wooded area with tall grass next to a white house. There, they were told they would wait for a pickup. The grassy hiding spot was the empty lot on Centeno Lane. Before their pickup arrived, Barrera found them. Moments later, Gomez was on the ground bleeding. The news of Gomez's death would shock people up and down the continent. In Guatemala, her home country, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will call a thorough investigation.
To continue with the article from the USA Today on Claudia Patricia Gonzales, the news of Gomez's death would shock people up and down the continent. In Guatemala, her home country, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would call for a thorough investigation. Border advocates did the same. In the weeks that followed, her parents would demand justice for their slain daughter. Her body was returned to her hometown, and hundreds of mourners flocked there to pay respects to Gomez during a funeral that drew international media attention. But in the first moments after the shooting, perhaps no one was more stunned than Marta Martinez. Her house sits next door to the empty lot. She was inside that day when she heard the gunshot. She emerged to find someone running across the front yard. Martinez would later say that she expected to find someone had shot up into the air. She waved through the cars parked out front and into the brush of the lot next door, her cell phone in hand.
Martinez started streaming the scene to Facebook Live. Once the controversy about her video blew up, she removed it from the internet. Today, Martinez declines to talk about what she saw, but news reports from the time detail how shocked she was when she saw Gomez in the brush of the empty lot. "Why did you shoot the girl? Why did you shoot the girl?" she shouted as the live stream rolled. "You killed her." The migrants' versions of events. The migrants' version of events. That question was much like the ones investigators would put to the men who were caught in the empty lot. Hours after the shooting, Carlos Perez Vicente, also a native of Quetzaltenango, Guatemala, would face FBI and Texas Rangers investigators in Laredo. He said he was with 5 other migrants, including Gomez, when Barrera approached them in the empty lot. A few of the migrants fled at the sight of the border agent, but Perez Vicente said he and Gomez stayed, crouching in the tall grass. He told investigators that Gomez then attempted to run away toward the street when she was shot and that she was near the fence. As investigators asked Perez Vicente if anyone in the group was armed or if anyone in the group tried to assault the Border Patrol agent, he said, "No," he said. Another asylum seeker on the scene, Damian Mendez Penalonso, also from Guatemala, described to investigators how Barrera approached them in the empty lot, walking slowly at first, then picking up his pace and drawing his gun as he spotted them crouched in the grass. Mendez Penalonso said no one rushed the agent and no one had any weapons or sticks. He said Gomez tried to flee over the fence when she was shot. He heard her let out a final short scream as she dropped to the ground, bleeding. As they spoke to the migrants at the FBI office, investigators would walk out the interrogation room, consult their notes, then re-enter and meticulously ask them specific questions again, such as their position relative to Barrera and whether any weapons were wielded at the agent. The witnesses stuck to their story. The migrants also were interviewed by Border Patrol attorneys over several days. According to the FBI agent, defense attorneys cross-examined 3 material witnesses for 3 days, and they never wavered from their initial testimony. The report read, their statements differed from Agent Barrera's account of events. A Webb County medical examiner's report would later say the bullet entered the back of Gomez's head, traveled right to the left and up, and exited the front, causing severe injury to the brain. Aligning with Perez Vicente's account, the death was ruled a homicide. The aftermath. Some of what happened between Gomez's shooting and Barrera's first interview 3 days later can be pieced together through statements in the investigative records. Body cam video pulled from Webb County Sheriff's deputies who responded to the shooting showed Barrera wearing black gloves at the scene, the kind of gloves another agent said were typically assigned to those patrolling on ATVs. As investigators at the scene began to interview witnesses, Sergio Buirando, a Laredo representative from the Border Patrol Union, arrived and drove Barrera to a spot a few blocks away. Border Patrol Assistant Chief Manuel Crispin Martinez soon arrived. "Are you good?" he asked Barrera. The agent nodded. Martinez took Barrera's .40 caliber handgun and put it in his holster, according to Buriano's later interviews with the investigators. In exchange, he handed Barrera his own service weapon. The 2 men hugged. Martinez then gave Barrera's weapon to another agent, who shoved it under the seat of his Chevy Tahoe. That agent drove Barrera 2 miles east to the Exxon gas station on US Highway 83. Buriano, the union rep, drove up, as did Altgelt, the Border Patrol attorney. They talked about what to do with Barrera and ultimately agreed to drive him farther away to a Border Patrol station near to Laredo. Later, an agent said he moved Barrera's weapon from under the seat of the Chevy to the console and brought it into the Border Patrol station. Though it's sometimes common to remove a firearm from the scene of an officer-involved shooting, it's less normal for officers to leave before speaking with any independent investigators, said Gil Kurlikowski, CPB commissioner from 2014 to 2017, who pushed for more transparency and better policing tactics at the agency. It's really helpful if they stay at the scene, Kurlikowski said. Certain things can come up, or there could be a question for the officer. You don't want them so far away you're missing something. The flood of agents who surrounded Barrera directed him away from questions and took over evidence such as his gun is a well-worn story for migrant advocates who spent years criticizing the Border Patrol's critical incident teams. This is standard operating procedure for border agents wanting to interfere with an investigation, said Adria Guerrero, executive director of Alliance San Diego, an advocacy group that has represented asylum seekers in officer-involved shootings. We've seen it happening across dozens, perhaps hundreds of cases over the years. In 2022, former CPB Commissioner Chris Magnus terminated the critical incident teams, but a year later, Guerrero and other advocates wrote a letter to Congress alleging that the practice continues. A U.S. Government Accountability Office report released last month studied how Customs and Border Protection and its investigative arm, the Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR, respond to incidents, including shootings. They found the agency still struggles to conduct independent, thorough investigations involving its agents. OPR has made significant progress implementing investigative standards, which it adopted in 2020, but it could strengthen its efforts regarding investigator independence, the report said. Catherine Hawkins of the Project on Government Oversight, a nonpartisan independent watchdog group that was also critical of the team, reaches a similar conclusion. There is some progress, she said, but it is unclear how far it's taken us. The National Border Patrol Council, a representative of the Laredo chapter of the union, and Algelt, the attorney representing Barrera, didn't respond to several requests for comment for this story. Texas Ranger E.G. Salinas, who took over the Gomez's investigation 3 months after the shooting, said Border Patrol union members, along with peer support teams and union attorneys, often arrive at the scene of agent-involved crimes before investigators do, and the agent will often leave the scene. Aside from questions about the agent's own culpability, the entire investigation becomes more difficult if the agent involved leaves the scene, he said. Collecting evidence is harder if the agent isn't there to point out where it may be. As the investigation unspooled, advocate groups sued the federal government over the shooting. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit on behalf of Gomez's family last year. The group settled with a government for an undisclosed amount. The Webb County District Attorney's Office declined to bring criminal charges against Barrera because, in part, Gomez's family was suing the federal government in a federal civil case. In an email dated January 6, 2022, Assistant District Attorney Amber Holmes wrote to the Border Patrol Laredo sector, stating she did not intend to file charges partly because federal prosecutors felt they could not prove willful intent, but also because the federal government was now defending Barrera in the civil suit. The federal government has already stated that they support Barrera's actions, and he committed no crime, she wrote. A spokeswoman for the district attorney's office said they couldn't comment on the case because it is still being investigated by CPB. A CPB spokeswoman wouldn't comment on the Gomez case, citing the ongoing investigation. As of the Texas Rangers investigation, it documents periodic inquiries until early 2019, when the work was submitted to prosecutors. It notes that after Barrera's .40 caliber pistol was transferred from person to person for hours after the shooting, it was finally submitted to an FBI laboratory for testing. The lab later concluded the distance from the pistol barrel to the wound on Gomez's head was less than 12 inches. But the black gloves Barrera was seen wearing at the shooting scene were never found. 5 days after the shooting, he was back at work. Rick Jervis is a national correspondent for the USA Today based in Austin, Texas. So, as you can see, in this update, which is a pretty thorough update that I found from USA Today. Justice has been thwarted, has been denied, has been delayed, and looks like it has been basically denied permanently because no criminal charges will be filed because some ridiculous reason, such as, oh yeah, there's a civil suit that would presumably they thought would bring some kind of justice or some kind of accountability, some financial accountability, which is ludicrous on its face. Financial accountability is not criminal accountability. They're two worlds apart. Or civil accountability is not the same as criminal accountability. I mean, is this a joke? And also the weak, feeble, and stupid and ridiculous reason that they're not going to pursue a case or they're not going to pursue charges because they don't think they can prove the agent had intent to murder or kill. I mean, these reasons are expected and are evidence, further evidence that the system is working to protect the Border Patrol agents at the expense, at the detriment of anyone that may have gotten hurt by them. So no accountability, no reprimand, no repercussions, no kind of consequence for something that is very close or that it is murder. And when there is no repercussion for murder or something close to murder, such as manslaughter or negligent manslaughter, when there's no consequence or repercussions to that, it clearly will continue. And that is the problem. Yes, there was a little bit of money that was settled in secret with some conditions of being silent about the case, not talking about it ever. That's probably why you don't hear about this case as much anymore, even though it's only been 7 years or so. And that is the sad situation that we find ourselves in, that Claudia Patricia never got justice here on earth. Maybe she will get justice, I am sure and confident that she will eventually. The arc of the universe, they say, bends toward justice. Hopefully this will be no exception with her and those that perpetrated this crime, because that's pretty much what it is. Nothing short of a crime and abuse against a poor, powerless, indigenous migrant only looking to have a chance. And these Border Patrol agents are pawns, are pieces on a game board being moved by a bigger system, a bigger player, a black hand, a conflagration of people, governments, agencies, cities, counties, so-called authorities. And the Border Patrol agent himself was a victim of this machinery that operates to control them, to tell them exactly how to behave, what to do, how to think, how to feel about immigrants, migrants, how to demonize them. I mean, they're fed these things day in and day out. So they're going to, sooner or later, act upon these feelings, all these mentalities that they've been fed pretty much their entire career and pretty much all their lives here in the U.S. Again, I wholeheartedly believe this is a supremacist, racial supremacist, racist, bigoted nation that teaches these things, this bigotry and racism, to children as young as they are to start school. That's when the training and the brainwashing begins, through the history books, through the stories they're told, through the imagery they're shown, through the fairy tales that they're told about the U.S. history and ideals, which have not to this day been put to practice, many of them. And through hiding the true history of the U.S. and through having this fantasy world put in front of their eyes where a certain group of people are the dominant, creative, controlling, and the people that organized the government and that run it and that make it work. This veil is put up
in front of all these people's eyes since they're young kids. So of course they're going to grow up with this mentality of a certain group being superior and a bunch of other groups being inferior, among those being immigrants and among those being poor people looking for opportunities in other places other than their homelands, which have been in many cases ravaged with poverty, violence, lack of employment, lack of activity, lack of education, and in many other instances these atrocities are brought by the very nations where these immigrants are going to, such as the US. So it is a complex web of things, of happenings, occurrences that unfortunately have led to the death of this indigenous young woman looking for an opportunity, economic, social opportunity here in the supposed land of opportunity. But even they are victims of this fantasy where the land of opportunity is often portrayed as a safe place, a place that there are many people welcoming, helping, which there are, but they're not in the numbers and magnitude as the fantasy tells. There's plenty of hatred-filled people waiting for their opportunity to abuse and, yes, hurt and kill other human beings. And I believe wholeheartedly this is what happened. This conflagration came together here in Rio Bravo, south of Laredo, Texas, right at the border here in Centeno Lane, very close to where I'm standing right now, making this recording. So I am saddened to give you this update, and however not surprised that this is where it has led. So justice will be served in other ways, in other places, not here in Texas, not here in Rio Bravo, because the evil and the system itself is so rotten, it is so malignant that it has very little chance to right the wrongs and make corrections. It's just going to keep eating itself. It is cancerous beyond help at this moment. So sometimes the whole mass needs to eat itself out and go before hopefully another thing or another situation, another system is born in its place. So that's where we're at, that's where we sit, that's the situation that we found ourselves in. And it doesn't look good for now, but again, with hope and with the confidence that things will right themselves eventually. This situation here with the violence, with the racism, with bigotry, with the hatred, with the hierarchy, with the borders, as an indigenous woman said in a recent report I heard, the fake and colonial borders that those that stole the land from the indigenous nations here in the Americas put and drew just a few hundred years ago. Now they are giving orders to shoot and kill those same indigenous people that cross those fake borders, those invalid and usurpous borders that they drew after they pillaged and raped and murdered and burned and killed and committed genocide all across the Americas. So that is where we stand. That is what has going on, and hopefully, and I am sure, I have that belief unshakably that Claudia Patricia Gonzales will get justice, whether in this realm or on another. I believe that she will. Thank you very much.
And one last set of thoughts that I'd like to share about the case of Claudia Patricia Gonzales is that it is sad and disturbing how the Border Patrol agent was protected from the get-go. He was shielded, covered, moved around, and there were attempts, seemingly, to thwart the investigation from minute one, from the beginning, seconds after the shooting. First, he was removed from the scene, taken miles away, and then later on, dozens of miles away. He was shielded from any kind of questioning on the same day, on the same moment, after the aftermath of what happened. So the investigation was thwarted, and it was
basically derailed from the beginning. As time goes on, of course, memories fade. Of course, memories are corrupted. Things become jumbled up and mixed. You begin to get ideas. You begin to get all kinds of justifications mentally in your mind, internal. You begin to make up explanations that may or may not be what occurred, what happened. So timing matters. Timing matters hugely in investigation, especially in shooting aftermaths. So that was one thing, having that agent moved out of the scene, fleeing the scene pretty much, is disturbing, to say the least. Also, the manipulation of evidence, tampering there with evidence from the get-go, the gun, the weapon, basically that is one of the most important pieces of evidence in any murder case, killing investigation, the body and the weapon used. If either one of those is missing, then the whole investigation is in question. The whole occurrence of things is already on shaky ground. And they know this, obviously, and I believe they know this. So the first thing they want to do, apparently, and this is what occurred, they want to disappear the weapon used. They want to misplace it. They want to shuffle it around to see if it could be misplaced, lost, and unaccounted for. All of a sudden, I think efforts for that were made, which are corrupt, which are malignant, and are devious, to say the least. It is a dereliction of duty and also obstruction of justice and obstruction of the investigation. Also, the blatant lies that I believe occurred with the sequence of events and the actual events that were claimed that happened. First, they claimed that the group rushed and attacked the officer, and they changed their story. They only said then that they rushed the officer, disobeying commands, and the deposition of the officer, as you listened to that report, to that article, he said that the assailants were attempting to grab his gun, and he made it seem like he, in the attempt for them not to get his gun, he shot the gun inadvertently. That is beyond a lie. That is beyond deceiving. That is beyond anything dealing with honesty. That has no resemblance of honesty. A shot to the back of someone's neck or head at close range, which was, as you can remember from the article, it was determined that it was close range, that the gun was fired, and the wound is proven to, under lab investigation, the lab results, it was proven that the wound was made from a gun fired inches from it. And they're going to claim, the officer claimed, that he was wrestling more than one person, and while he was wrestling more than one person, he accidentally shot his gun into whatever direction, not knowing whether he actually fired the gun or not. I mean, the level of manipulation, the level of just lying, and the blatant theatrics being played, that were played there to come up with this explanation. It is a blatant and clearly, carefully calculated, and those statements were carefully choreographed with the help of course, the lawyers that spirited the agent from the scene. And again, it is sad, corrupt, it is deceiving what went on. It is, by all means, a bunch of attempts occurred, apparently, to hide the truth, to cover the truth. This is the textbook example of a cover-up. And since they're dealing with very little power, they're dealing with illegal, what they call illegal immigrants, they feel very comfortable making all these maneuvers and very confident that they are going to get away with it, as they did. So that confidence comes, again, as I've said before, that confidence comes from somewhere, and it is based on the very fact that they know that they can get away with it. They may think they got away with it, but I believe they did not. I believe this will haunt that agent the rest of his life. That experience is not going to go away in his dreams, in his thoughts, private thoughts. He knows where he lied, where he was dishonest, where he was deceiving, where he was blatantly covering up and omitting the truth. And that has consequences, severe consequences at the end. I hope the person and the machinery behind him, because it's not only him, it's the machinery that allows and pushes people like those officers to those things and to react in the manner that he did, cowardly, trying to get away from the truth, trying to hide the truth, instead of facing, as they say, instead of facing whatever consequences. So if he was so justified, if he did the right thing in his mind, there's no need to flee, there's no need to lie, there's no need to change your story a couple of times, there's no need to try to disappear any weapon, there's no for any of these theatrics and carefully choreographed statements made by lawyers and unions and the department. Thank you very much.
Another comment I wanted to make about the Claudia Patricia Gonzales case is that the officer, he made a deposition that he was attacked, rushed by the group, the 4 to 5 member group, and his deposition, his statements are pretty much in contrast, go against the evidence, the video, what actually happened, and even what they themselves, the Border Patrol, says that happened. So it is contradictory, and it is obviously a lie, deceiving, and it is a made-up story, what the officer claimed happened. First, the officer claimed happened was that he was searching for illegal activity. He spotted some individuals, and they immediately rushed him and began to try to wrestle him, and at the same time he felt like they were reaching for his gun. That was his deposition, his statements that were carefully choreographed and orchestrated together with his attorneys. The video that clearly shows one officer, which there is no dispute that only one officer was involved in the chase, in the shooting, in the encounter, the initial encounter especially with the individuals. The video, a live video shot by Marta Martinez, I believe her name was, shows the aftermath. It shows moments after the officer shot Claudia Patricia, and also shows the officer with his gun pointed at a group of individuals. Or it doesn't show that he's pointing the gun at a group of individuals. He's shown going towards a empty, half-constructed house and hauling out about 2 individuals, arresting 2 individuals and taking them out of the house. So he was able to fight off the individuals, arrest them, 2 of them. I believe 2 more escaped or ran away. Not sure if they were later captured. But he was able to shoot the girl and apprehend 2 other individuals. So how in the world do you fight off several individuals that are rushing you and attempting to take your gun away, shoot one individual that was attempting to escape, which was the woman, and then you are shown on video going into the house, going into this empty, half-constructed home? I believe I saw him with a gun drawn, which was also the statements from the immigrants that were captured, that were apprehended. They stated clearly that at gunpoint they were told to get out of the house, where they were later grabbed and apprehended. So how do you do that while you're being attacked? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But it makes all the sense in the world that you sneaked up on these individuals where you knew exactly where they were, and as they tried to flee, you just shot one of them. No warning, no commands, which no one in the area other than the officer said that they were given. So you may have gotten startled, whatever the case may have been when they tried to flee, but you just shot individuals at an individual at very close range, and then proceeded to arrest the other 2, since you soon figured out that you had actually mortally wounded or killed one of them. That was pretty much enough for you, and you were happy with your day's worth of work. So you proceeded to go ahead and not shoot anyone else and just apprehend the ones that you could apprehend. So this is the mentality, the deception going on, the mentality that these officers have, I believe, wholeheartedly, that they have very little or no value for immigrant life, what they call illegal immigrant life. And many of these officers are of Hispanic heritage, immigrant heritage, and many of these officers have family that were illegal immigrants at one point. Maybe their parents, some of them even themselves may have been illegal immigrants at one point. However, the system feeds into their head that they should hate the practice, hate the individuals, not only the practice, but especially the individuals that engage in this desperate and in many cases necessary practice. These people, in many cases, not all, of course, but in many cases, they're fleeing violence, abject hunger, poverty, destitution, homelessness, persecution in many cases by gangs, by criminal activity. They may be attempting to escape hate or some kind of persecution because of their race, religion, beliefs, lack thereof beliefs, sexual orientation, sexuality, etc. I mean, this happens all the time, and it is just dumb to assume that all these people, as many politicians have claimed or suggested, that these people are uneducated. Claudia Patricia Gonzales was a very educated young woman looking for an opportunity to go to work with an Atlanta connection through her father. Her father was, I believe, a electrical worker in Georgia, in Atlanta, where he was deported. And she wanted an opportunity for her and her family to come work and use her education, her training as an accountant here in the U.S. A gift to the U.S. was lost that afternoon in May of 2018. And however, these officers, with their mentality of violence and death and destruction, don't see any of that. That officer may not see that even to this day. Hopefully he does. He will see what he has done. As you heard from that article, the officer was back to work 5 days later. No remorse, obviously. And clearly, he picked up the badge and the gun, right up, and went back to work. So the system works very well in protecting the officers when they do these things. That's their goal. Their goal is to deter immigration. And one effective way to do that is by killing and publicizing those killings. So the agency is going to, one, make sure that it is protected, that it is something that there's no punishment for, because they want the public to know that the possible consequences of migrating to the United States, which is death. The system works very well in counseling these individuals or brainwashing them into believing that they did the right thing, that they had no choice, when they clearly and obviously know that they did have a choice. The choice of attempting to capture these individuals without attempting to killing them, without attempts at killing them. I mean, if you clearly see these individuals are desperate and unarmed, as these were clearly, as it was clearly the case here, then why proceed with fatal or mortal violence in shooting at these individuals? There's plenty of opportunity to capture them, plenty of resources to capture them. There's plenty of backup to capture them, intercept them. There was no need to kill or maim anyone that day. And the deception and the lies from the events that occurred are so clear and so blatant. That is why this case is so mystifying, and it caught international attention because of the blatant cover-up, the blatant lies, and the blatant change of stories. And as this article shows, there were manipulations, there were movements, there were all kinds of efforts early on to begin to thwart the investigation, to cover up what happened, to deny this young woman justice. And one last thing I wanted to mention is that the minute that the officer shot this young woman, fatally so, it is pretty sad that he immediately, knowing exactly what he did, he immediately went ahead and left the woman laying on the ground, bleeding, dying, and instead of dropping the weapon and tending to the young woman, regardless of what may happen with any other individual that is unarmed and clearly fleeing for their lives, fleeing to migrate for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. There's a person dead or dying that needs tending immediately, and the officer, the first thing that instinctively he does is give his back to this dead or dying woman and go apprehend two other individuals when he could clearly call for backup and attend to the woman, whose life could have been saved by some emergency procedure, some emergency aid, stopping the bleeding, etc. But no, this person decided, for whatever reason, whether he knew already that person would have been dead or would have died anyway, he proceeded to very calmly, according to this video that I've seen, apprehend the two individuals and walk all the way to his truck and put these individuals in his truck, and then not coming to the scene at all again. I don't believe he ever came back to the scene, so he just stayed away from it, and other officers came and rendered aid, perhaps just to go through the motions and make the reluctant efforts to appear as if they cared, or as if they just to cover their bases, and later be able to say that they rendered aid.